We're going to cover 5 things you should never ever do when it comes to hair loss. Why, you might ask? Well, simply put, it's very, very easy to make things worse. And when it comes to your hair, it's much easier to stop further hair loss than it is to regrow it. So if you actually lose ground by doing the wrong thing, it can set you back a long way. Right, so let's jump in and take a look at the 5 things someone who's worried about hair loss should never ever do. Okay, number 1 is treating it without a diagnosis. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make when dealing with hair loss is jumping straight into treatment without a proper diagnosis. Hair loss isn't always as straightforward as it seems. There's over a dozen different causes at least, and unless you know what's causing yours, you could be wasting your time, money, and even making that problem worse. The most common type of hair loss in men is androgenetic alopecia, also known as pattern hair loss. This is the main focus of this channel. But other causes include stress-related shedding, so-called telogen effluvium, autoimmune conditions like alopecia areata, nutritional deficiencies, and scalp infections. Oftentimes, a person is dealing with more than one of these types of hair loss simultaneously. They each have their own underlying mechanism and require a different approach. Using the wrong treatment could not only fail to help, it might make things worse by irritating your scalp or interfering with your natural hair growth cycle. For example, if a deficiency in iron or vitamin D is contributing to your hair loss, you'll need to address those nutritional issues first before looking at any topical treatments. On the other hand, if it's a classic case of androgenetic alopecia without any identifiable complicating factors, you'll want to focus on proven medications like finasteride or scalp tension reduction techniques like with the Grow Band Pro. So before you start any treatment, take a step back and get that diagnosis. Next up, mistake number 2 is jump on and off Minoxidil. This is one of the most common mistakes we see in the hair loss community, and the psychological consequences can be so discouraging that many guys will throw in the towel and give up on treating their hair loss altogether. So here's the deal. The gains that you get from Minoxidil cannot be maintained by any other treatment, at least not one that we know of today. Any hair that you might have regrown through Minoxidil will fall out within 3 to 4 months after you stop. And there is no amount of finasteride or any other treatment on the market today that can stop this. Clinical researchers have tried to find a solution to this problem, and they've basically always failed. This is because the mechanism of action of other drugs and treatments is different and cannot compensate for the discontinuation of Minoxidil. Furthermore, even in the event where you don't appear to respond to Minoxidil, once you stop using it, you might find out that that was not in fact the case. So in other words, while you may have not seen regrowth, the Minoxidil may have been helping to stabilize your current hair loss. After you stop it, there's a possibility that the hair loss will return with a vengeance. This can be so demoralizing at times that it can leave you feeling like hair loss is completely hopeless. When this happens, you would have been infinitely better off never having started Minoxidil in the first place. The takeaway from this is that Minoxidil should be a long-term commitment, if at all. Weigh the potential benefits against the inconvenience of the application and sincerely ask yourself if you'd be willing to do this on an indefinite basis. What's really unfortunate though is that Minoxidil is widely available without a prescription, and it's by far the most well-known and accessible hair loss treatment. So this basically causes a lot of guys to quickly jump on Minoxidil without first considering the long-term picture. Okay, on to number 3, and that is neglecting your diet. It might surprise you, but what you eat can play a significant role in hair loss. Research shows that poor dietary habits, like eating too many high glycemic foods and unhealthy fats, can contribute to androgenetic alopecia. It's no coincidence that dozens of studies over the last decades have found increased rates of heart disease in men with AGA, androgenetic alopecia. The typical Western diet, loaded with refined sugars, processed carbs, they promote insulin resistance and chronic inflammation, both of which have been linked to increased hair loss. Moreover, these problems in controlling blood glucose levels can deplete your energy reserves in your hair follicles, making it difficult for them to regenerate and grow healthy hair. Another culprit is high cholesterol intake. Elevated cholesterol levels are associated with sebaceous gland enlargement and increased sebum production. This excess sebum nourishes harmful bacteria in the scalp, potentially triggering inflammation around the follicle and further disrupting that hair growth cycle. Magnesium deficiency is another concern. This essential mineral helps regulate calcium, glucose, and cholesterol metabolism. Low magnesium levels can also contribute to chronic scalp tension, as the muscles in the scalp become less relaxed when magnesium is lacking. So what's the good news? Well, a low glycemic, nutrient-dense diet can make a real difference. Cut out that junk and focus on whole foods, rich in fiber, lean protein, healthy fats, and essential minerals. Okay, number 4, the fourth mistake is starting a treatment that you can't afford to continue. Hair loss is a long-term condition, and it will be very useful for you to adopt this mentality when planning your treatments. Even if you have aggressive baldness, treatment decisions are not urgent. You can always afford to wait a little bit longer before making a decision, weighing up the pros and cons of various treatment options. Unfortunately, many guys with hair loss will be pressured by their treating specialist into making a quick and potentially very costly treatment decision. This can often happen at the same visit as they are diagnosed with baldness. Now, I'm going to tell you a little secret. When it comes to hair loss, the cost of the treatment does not generally correlate with the effectiveness. Some of the best treatments on the market today are basically next to free, and the high-tech, state-of-the-art, super expensive treatments generally can give poor to non-existent results. It's just not that correlated. I'm thinking here of most treatments that have to be done at a doctor's office or clinic. The most popular one is PRP, but there are others like stem cell therapy, exosomes, and so on. What all these treatments have in common is an insane price tag, with each session often costing up to thousands of dollars or more. Another feature of all these treatments is that there's generally no long-term efficacy data. Often there's very little efficacy data to begin with, be it long or short term. In other words, we don't really know how well these treatments work and how long the results will last before you require additional treatments. So by all means, if you decide to have one of these treatments, then go ahead with it. Just make sure you do your homework first and ask the provider to supply all the available information about the short and long-term prospects, as well as the projected cost of the treatment over your lifetime. Only if you find out that you can really afford it long-term should you go ahead with it. Stopping and reversing hair loss is all about consistency. Finally, mistake number 5 is getting a premature hair transplant. Related to what we were just discussing are hair transplants. The technology of hair transplants has reached a point today where they can give fantastic results without serious risks or permanent scarring or any other injury. Men with hair loss, even at advanced stages, are often able to restore a much healthier looking hairline, and in the hands of a competent surgeon, this can look incredibly natural. What is important to understand, however, is that these surgeries are not an actual treatment for hair loss. They merely redistribute whatever hair you have left on your head to create the illusion of fullness all over. Even the most skilled surgeon in the world won't be able to add a single new hair to your scalp. If you haven't addressed the underlying cause of hair loss, then you will continue to lose hair even after the transplant. You will then require a costly second or even third transplant until, in the end, you will have exhausted that donor area. Related to this is the mistake of having a procedure at a very young age. Anyone under the age of 25 at an absolute minimum, and more realistically 30 years old, should strongly consider if the time is right or probably not. This was famously the case with Joe Rogan, who had publicly discussed having 3 hair transplants, the first of which was at age 26. Without having addressed that underlying cause of hair loss, he continued to lose hair until, in the end, he just shaved his head and gave up. So by all means, go for a hair transplant, but the most important factor is, have you stabilized your current hair loss? If you haven't, then you really need to rethink it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.